The Greens haven't gone. Sue Keedsley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, well, I just want to take up the issues that Stuart Nash was raising. And it is absolutely true, as the Minister have clarified, that all participating local governments will be required to guarantee each other's debt. And so if one council were to default, all would have to pay. But I notice actually that the government would not be liable. So the government may contribute, I believe it's 5% for the first 10 years, but it will not be, the government will not be liable. It will only be the councils that will be liable. Now, the Minister has said, well, not to worry because it's extremely unlikely. And I would agree that it is unlikely that a council would default. It's unlikely because they can always pass on they can raise the rates to pay for increases in debt if they found themselves in this situation. However, it isn't unimaginable. I mean, we have had the situation in Canterbury, which was unimaginable. We could have further situations. We could have one right here in Wellington, and we could be in a situation where there were defaulting councils. What worries me is that I don't think most ratepayers are aware, really, that their councils are signing up to this new funding agency, because while there is a requirement that they inform them through their financial statement, the reality is that most ratepayers don't really look at the fine print of the financial statement, and I would expect that a lot of ratepayers actually would have no idea that this is going on or no idea of their joint liability through this new funding agency. And the other, I mean, don't get me wrong, the Green Party is supporting this, but we do have some qualms about it. And the other one is that there is once you get cheaper borrowing, which essentially this is all about, the temptation will be to increase borrowing, particularly when we're in a situation when councils don't want to put up the rates. We're in a very tight financial situation, and it would be politically unacceptable actually for most councils to put up the rates in any substantial way. But we have a problem with some councils, like the Auckland Council, having to make substantial investments, and in particularly in public transport, because whereas the government will pay 100% of roads, of motorways, they will only pay 50% for public transport. So the local council, if it wants to develop public transport, has to invest 50% of any major public transport initiative. So, there are substantial amounts of investment that need to be made, and the temptation will be to do all of it through debt. Now, there is an argument that if you're going to come up with some major infrastructure, like say a new rail loop, that you spread the debt over generations, that's fine. But I fear the temptation will be, let's not put up the rates because that will be politically unacceptable, we'll all be voted out of office. Let's just keep piling up, putting everything off into this debt mechanism, and in time we could end up with more and more council debt and a blowout of council debt, and then down the road, say 10 years from hence, we could find this funding agency with huge debts, and we could find some councils defaulting, and we could find ourselves in a situation and everyone would say, well, how did this happen? How did but no one told us that we'd signed up to this entity. No one really consulted with us. So we do have some real concerns about that, and we think that there needs to be much greater awareness amongst ratepayers, much greater understanding of what we're getting into here, of the joint liability, of the fact that if any participating authority defaults, the debt will be shared, and that people need to be going into this with their eyes open. And let us hope we don't have more and more. Well, let's hope this doesn't inadvertently end up triggering greater and greater amounts of council debt accumulating over the next 10 years because we have made debt cheaper through this mechanism. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Rodney Hyde.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Sue Keedsley does make a very important point, and it becomes a general one for councils that they do enter into investments and take on debt largely without the awareness of ratepayers. And they can actually delay the impost of the consequences of that investment or that debt for some years. And we are now having to deal with some councils that are being forced to put up rates. And that can actually be just a running down of general infrastructure too that gets pushed forward. So I do accept that point. What we've attempted to do there is, with the changes that we made to the Local Government Act, we require from the next election on councils to put out a financial report in plain English. So we're hoping through that local media and interested citizens can get a much greater sense of the true financial state of their council at the time when it's most valuable to them. That is the time that they're actually making a vote, and also the challenges that council confronts. And I think if we'd had that reporting procedures some years back, we mightn't have got ourselves into some trouble with councils. It's also the case too, yes, you lower the cost of the debt, you might expect more of it, but bear in mind that there will be considerable discipline on the funding agency because they'll be representing all the councils. So they won't be just sitting there like an ATM machine handing out money for whatever particular project that a council might come up with. They'll be actually looking at with some scrutiny at it because it's actually going to be a debt carried by all the councils together. So in a way, one of my worries as Minister, or one observing it, is that you can have, say, quite a small council that may not be all that sophisticated. We quite like the small councils because they represent, the community, and so nothing particularly against them, but they can easily find themselves into borrowing on some rather unfortunate investments that get pushed into the future. Interestingly, in going off to the funding agency, they'll actually have a proper scrutiny because the people that they're borrowing off are the other councils who in a funny way will have a better understanding and information about the situation of local councils than might otherwise be the case, because a particular bank will, sure, they'll lend it to you because they know that actually you can just put rates up into the future. But so we maybe through this funding agency actually have a greater discipline, particularly with the smaller councils that may not have that level of sophistication that a larger council would have.
Yeah, I'm just checking. Phil Twyford.